Roll call, please.
Hi, Mike Davenport,
Here.
Christopher Espinoza,
Here.
Sherelle Fuller,
Here.
Jenny Hagstrom,
Here.
Terry Pavicic,
Nearby.
Nancy Kupka,
Here.
Luca Palauskas,
Here.
Caitlin Vincent.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a quorum. Let's stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we start with student perspectives.
I'm going to actually go hang
no,
the
are you
hand
okay?
off. Yeah, it's cold.
Oh, thank you. That's
Good.
short.
There you go.
Good evening. Today, for student perspectives at South High, we are celebrating student achievement in communications. So it's actually threefold presentation, but under the umbrella of achievement in communications. So you're going to hear from our blueprint staff, our yearbook staff, and IHSA short film. So English teachers in the room will appreciate 3 different modes of medium in which to communicate, and we're super excited, super proud of them. So I'm just going to start by introducing Ava and Kaven. Come on up.
There you go.
There you go. All right. So you two are going to introduce yourself, talk about blueprint, and then we'll. All right.
Alright guys, my name is Takaven Russell. I am a senior and I graduate.
Serious.
Hi, my name is Ava Lappin. I'm also a senior, and we're just going to talk to you about our school newspaper, which is called The Blueprint. So how to join advanced journalism, that's kind of just the basic term for the Blueprint class. Most people take the prerequisite, which is journalistic expressions, and you can kind of just learn throughout the journalism course, and you also sometimes get to freelance on the website or in the print in some cases. Or in my case, I got a recommendation from my English teacher my sophomore year, and I was able to take the course my junior year and again my senior year. We also have a couple other journalism related classes at South, such as TV or radio, and I know some people who take those as well as Blueprint the same year, and you can get recommendations in class that way.
What is Blueprint? Blueprint is advanced journalism. It's a full year course. We run it like a real newsroom, so like you get the experience of if you was wanting to be a journalist of like that environment. It's student led, so we have our teacher who's in the room with us, but we usually take control of everything and how it's run.
We design and create the physical newspaper. We hand it out. This year we had 5 cycles. Some years it is a little bit different. 5 to 6 is usually where we're at. And we also publish online on South Blueprint. We try to publish at least a couple times a week, and we even do it during the summer. So we have been revving up the summer, getting some stuff ready for that. And then we also had the chance to compete at IJEA or IHSA, which last week we placed 3rd at IHSA state competition. We also won our sectional this year, so we're really proud of everyone who was participating in that, and some of the yearbook folks also were there too. So, a little bit about our website. We publish in 5+ categories. That includes news, opinions, entertainment, features, and sports. We also do fun quizzes and listicles, and every article and everything we have is an original photo, which I think is really unique, and I didn't know that going into Blueprint, but I've really gotten good at taking photos, and I think it's just something that it's just really fun to do, and we have a lot of different people, specific people. David here is a photo and graphics editor, so he can kind of take care of all that. And then we also edit the pages of the newspaper. We have a 12-page spread, and each section of people takes care of a couple different pages. And it really holds you responsible. That's what I like about the class. I'm an editor-in-chief this year, and I stand up in front of my whole class just like this every day and talk about what we're going to do each day. And it's really given me a great experience of leadership, and I know everyone in the class really loves to like the family environment that we have. We're having a party in a couple weeks, and yeah, we're just really excited. And we also distribute the newspaper, so every time the cycle comes out, we walk around to classes with carts full of newspapers, and it's just really a fun environment and really good team
Yeah.
building. Yeah.
I really love how we get to be ourselves and come up with segments that not normal for really news sources or whatever, and just get to make the blueprint our own in our home. The benefits,
Oh, we have one more thing.
Okay, sorry.
the benefits of the blueprint is, like she said, taking responsibility and taking the experience of being in a real newsroom, and like, yeah, we call it the Blueprint Lab, and we just really get the work done. Whatever we receive awards called Best of Snow Online. That is really like strong awards if you guys don't know in journalism. In IJEA and IHSA. So we're really proud to be on the Blueprint.
Alright, yeah, we would like to introduce the IHSA short film, which is Bradley, Mason, and Josh.
Hello everyone, I'm Joshua Traga and I'm a senior at Downers Grove South High School.
I'm Bradley Padovic. I'm also a senior at South.
And I'm Mason Townsend. I'm also a senior at South.
So this year we created our school's first short film, and in terms of how to join, you'll have to contact Chris Blum. Chris Blum. That's right. Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Blum. And you'll have to include any of your previous film or editing experience, all of your creative ideas. You can even submit a rough draft screenplay. He's basically the guy that will run the whole logistics of it, getting it together. He was a great help to us this year. So the short film is a yearly competition held by the IHSA that started just a few years ago. And any students in IHSA high schools can submit it as long as it's under 5 minutes. And I think it's technically a part of speech and debate. Because we traveled with the GI team, so the group interp team from South. We traveled with them because the short film was held at the same time as that competition. And so the fun thing about the short film for IHSA is that the short film has to be made entirely by students. So all the acting, editing, shooting, writing, directing, all of that has to be made by us and our fellow students. Now, Mr. Blum did help quite a bit in terms of budgeting, transport, all those things, but when it comes to the final product, it's basically all our creation. So yeah, it's really exciting because this is a very, very new thing. Like it says there, it's only been in the IHSA competition line for about 3 years or so. And we were happy to go this year and compete, and we placed about 7th overall out of 48 with a rating of superior. So.
Very good.
So our short film was titled You'll Never Guess, and we submitted it for the IHSA drama short film competition, which was directed by myself, Mason, Bradley, and NB Bandera. And then, as Bradley was saying earlier, yeah, our sponsor was Mr. Chris Blum. But then we also had a bunch of help from different staff members along the way. We kind of talked to Mr. Evans, who helped with props or any prop stuff that we needed. We had Mrs. Primos be a chaperone. She actually may take over the role next year because Mr. Blum has a lot going on already. So Mrs. Primos may take over to help him out with that, which would be amazing to have her help out with that. And she was actually the one that got all of us together for this today. We all met through our same English class, making videos for that.
Yeah, we started making videos in English class, all 3 of us. We made the Wolves of Wall Street and some other videos. And that's how we got recommended.
Parody of it, but yeah.
Yeah, that's how we got recommended into the director position before IHSA. So that.
And just to continue on, the film kind of, for us, what we filmed is about a student kind of following different rumors and trying to figure out what was going on, but you learn later that it's kind of a story that talks about how these rumors get out of hand and they can kind of twist the truth and make turn people's good images for the worst, and how we shouldn't really kind of fall for these false rumors. So
there's a good message in it. It's also entertaining. A little bit of horror aspects in it too. We got one of the judges to jump back. We got a little jump scare for him, so we're proud of that. But, yeah, he watched in a dark room. He hated us for that. And then yeah, we had a lot of students that were part of it. As Bradley was mentioning, some specific ones we also like to shout out is Brianna Ziegler. She was like kind of our manager with keeping us on time because we always really want to make sure the scenes were right, but we didn't want to like shoot till midnight either. So she kind of kept us on top of that and making sure everyone's in the right spot. So even though there may not like, even though there's us as the directors, there's so many other rules that we learned that come into this. So yeah, we have the people in charge of keeping us on task. We had the makeup artists. We had editors such as Xander Sparija, who spent like 13 hours, I think, just going nonstop editing on our short film. And it was only 5 minutes. So the amount of editing that goes into that is insane. And then we had, yeah, makeup artists, as I was saying, and a bunch of other people. And we're really grateful of also the Blueprint giving us some of their cameras and equipment to help all this come possible. So it's great how we can all work as a community and kind of just work with everyone here together to get this all done. And then, yeah, that's all for this slide.
Perfect. So benefits of short film provides you a great experience if you're looking to pursue a film career. So like a lot of things that I learned while I was doing it, it's like sometimes you can like go into a 5-minute short film. It's a 5-minute short film, so it could be easy. You know, you think it's kind of like, oh, we're just gonna record a video, we're gonna have fun with it. But there's like a lot of things that go into it, make a really good short film, and you learn that while you're doing it. So if you're interested in film, it's a really good experience to kind of just like see how real film works and like all the aspects that go into it, and maybe where you fit in with all those aspects. Another thing that goes into that is you're working with so many different students, like Josh said. You're working with editors, makeup people, just people helping you stay on track, and it's really awesome to be able to work collaboratively with a bunch of different students. And I think that's actually one of the best parts, is just hanging out with all of our staff members and all of our actors and everybody who helped out. And it was just awesome being there with everybody and just like being able to interact and make something really awesome for all of our time. And then also, it's just a really cool experience to just have a film. You know, it's up and coming, so you get to be a part of a new and up-and-coming competition field, and that's just a really cool experience within itself.
Thank you everyone for your time. Now we'd like to introduce Yearbook.
We're not going to see the film?
I will have them forwarded to us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Because it's
don't watch it in
only
the
5
dark, Jerry.
minutes, so.
Watch it in the dark.
Don't watch it in the dark.
It was a good film. Anyways, my name is Hannah Rodak. I'm a senior editor on our yearbook staff.
And I'm Mia Casson, and I'm also a senior editor on the yearbook staff. So just some general information about yearbook. So it is a class. A lot of people don't know that, but it is like a class that you can join and get credit for every year. So the class is made up of staff members, 4 editors this year, which is us and 2 other girls, and our advisor, who's Miss O'Truck. There is an additional option to join yearbook club if you like don't have the room in your schedule or you just like want to go and not have it be so like strict in a class. But the staff works throughout the year to gather information to create pages about literally everything in school. So that includes sports, activities, every club. And then for editors in the beginning of the year, we choose the theme of the yearbook and we design the templates with which the staffers use to put their pictures and their stories in and everything like that. And we create a style guide as well as an edit pages in each deadline.
And if you see on the screen, those are the 4 editors. It's myself and Mia, as well as Haley Fredericks and Julia Frauendorf. So we weren't sure how familiar you guys were with the type of yearbooks that we create. We wanted to give you an anatomy of a yearbook spread so you can get a little taste of what we do in class every day. So first is our cover mock-up. That's actually what the cover of our yearbook is going to look like. So keep it secret. We haven't released it to the students yet, just for you guys to see.
Pretty sure they're not watching.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're not watching the public.
Yeah, really. It's still a secret.
Okay. But we're so proud of this cover and of this book. We're really excited. Our yearbooks get sent into NISBA to get awards, similar to how the Blueprint submits their newspapers as well. So we're excited to see how this yearbook does next year. And then just a reference, this is what an example page of a yearbook looks like. This is actually taken from a sports template that Mia and I and the other editors created. So you'll just see some buzzwords. There's primary headlines where you title the page so the students can figure out what's going on in the page. There's a feature story. In past years, we've collaborated with the Blueprint and used some of the stories that they've written and credited those authors as well, just to kind of get some variety in our stories in our yearbook. You can see we have options for team photos and many, many photo spots. Those are the blue squares and rectangles that you see. We try to get as much coverage of our students as possible. And then you'll see little modules. Because this is a sports page, you can see there's scoreboards, there's polls. We just really want to get as many students covered in our yearbook as possible because there's such a diverse population at DGS.
So next, some accomplishments and opportunities you get from being on the yearbook staff. So this year we received a bronze award for last year's book, which was New Horizons from the Northern Illinois Scholastic Press Association, otherwise known as NISPA. And this included several honorable mentions for coverage, our theme and concept, and design. We also received a Golden Eagle Award, which is like the best of the best you can get, for our 2020-2021 book, Out of the Blue. Our staff is also given the opportunity to compete at journalism sectionals and state along with Blueprint. This year, all 4 editors actually made it to state, and our yearbook copywriting person, which is me, received 3rd individually at state, and then our team placed 3rd overall.
Excellent.
Very good.
And then just to talk about some of the benefits of being on yearbook, you get to learn about different leadership skills. So being editors, me and I really get to learn how to talk to people, how to help them figure out their pages, how to like correct mistakes, things like that, and positive criticism. You get to collaborate with other staff members and make friends. As you see, there's a picture from prom and just some selfies that the editors and I have taken because you really get to build some deep friendships with the people on staff because you spend so much time creating this yearbook and working together and collaborating. You also get to meet different students and staff through interviews and working on pages because we do like to focus on getting as many student perspectives as possible. We like to interview students, we like to ask them questions like, what's happening in this photo? How are you feeling when this happened? So you get to get a lot of different perspectives from the students and the staff in our community. And no previous classes are needed to be eligible to join. Anyone can join our class, anyone can join the club. You can do both at the same time. It's really a flexible setting. And just overall, you get to create the book that students will look back on for years to come, which is honestly something really special. And it's amazing seeing the book at the end of the year, seeing all of your hard work go into it, and knowing that the students are going to appreciate it and look back at it. It's a great feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Questions for any of our students?
Well,
I got some.
I do too.
Yeah. So,
Mike the
all right,
Jerry.
what's a listicle?
Oh, a listicle is we do top 10s, and then we also have done like horoscopes in the past. We usually do those for over the summer, so
Got it.
in our class in the past couple weeks, we kind of got together because we were like, okay, we need stuff going up over the summer, so we stay on track, and so we're staying trending. So I know I've done top 10 listicles before, and one of our most popular ones is top 10 hardest words to say with a lisp. So if you see that trending, it kind of always is. But yeah, so just top 10s, lists of things that we like or things that we want to share. So yeah.
Terrific. Thank you. Yes. And I just want to say, Mr. Boom, Ms. Otruck, and Ms. Long are awesome, aren't they? Yes, they're awesome. So, yes, I had students that were involved. And actually, I think my daughter Andrea, who's going to be graduating this week from college, it was really, being part of Blueprint, I think that steered her into wanting to be a teacher because of that experience, having to kind of run things a little bit and organize and run the class. So it's excellent. You never know where this might take you. So are there plans to do anything
That was my question.
in college?
Oh, Terry.
Oh, that was Terry.
Terry's
I'm
question.
sorry.
No, I just want to know from each
Yeah.
group if
Yeah.
this is going to be a kind of predecessor for what you want to do
Yeah.
in life.
Well, for me, I think I like the Clark Kent aspect. So I plan on majoring in college.
Okay.
Taking a minor in it.
Very cool.
Okay. How about the film guys? Because, right now, there could be a writer's strike, so they might be needing you.
Right now I have a scholarship for Augustana for a film major at the moment.
Excellent
Okay.
school. Good school.
Very good, very good. How about the blueprint, or the,
Well,
Yearbook.
I personally am
Yearbook.
not going to be going into any type of yearbook, anything related, but one of our editors, Julia, she's going into marketing and specifically the graphic design element of it. And she was first introduced into graphic design and all of those things through yearbook.
I'm going to go into teaching and English because I've always loved to write, which is why I went
There you go.
to state for yearbook copywriting. And I just also love the leadership aspect, and that really ties into being a teacher. So.
okay, very good.
Very cool.
Do they still have the journalism camp in the summer?
No,
No.
they had to
They
stop
stopped
because
that?
of COVID.
And they haven't picked that back up
It
yet?
has not been picked back up
Bummer.
yet. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, you guys are all doing a fabulous job. We look at the yearbook every year when it comes out.
Yep,
And,
yep.
and
yep.
we're just really proud of it. And I read the blueprint when
Yep.
we get it, so,
We make sure to send some this
so
way.
that's,
We always save 10 for the office, and we say this specifically goes to the district office. So we always make sure to feed you guys.
so we really appreciate it, because it kind of keeps us up to what you guys are thinking and doing in school. So we really appreciate that. And
Maybe-
I want to see that 5-minute film.
Oh, yeah, right. You'll get us the link.
Yeah, we'll get it to you.
Any chance video announcements might be coming back?
I would love that. I would love that too. I wish we could do it this year, to be
We'll
honest.
get some people on it.
I think they're gonna make a return at North. So
Are they? Okay.
stay
Yeah.
tuned.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we have our final student board member reports. Who's up first?
Do you want to go first?
Yes, I can go first. Okay, so it's more so like the final stretch now. There's obviously only a few weeks left. Everyone's trying to get everything together and just keep their confidence up and get through all these great exams that are happening this week. And obviously, there has been a lot of stress with students and changes going on, such as the exams and just trying to get through all the activities. But that's why North has come up with so many different things just to boost everyone's spirits. One of them being that we had our graduation concert last Thursday, which was amazing, and one of a film music composer named Jermaine, I might butcher the last name, Stagel, came in and commissioned a piece called True North in honor of Mr. Teague, a teacher who has been at North for around 30 years. So that was really nice and heartwarming to see. And also to kind of recognize students who have been doing great at North, we have our senior awards ceremony this Wednesday that's occurring around 7 p.m., which is going to be exciting to see as well. And today specifically, because it is decision day, everyone decided to wear their apparel or shirts, even just a hat or something to show off where they're going. Different people going to the military, different people going to college, or automatically going into a career, which is really nice to see the community of students that we have created over the last 4 years. Also, because of this season and it's the final stretch, a lot of the sports are also ending, and it gets pretty emotional because you've been with these people for so long and you've created this home environment with everyone, and there's things such as conference and state coming up, and it's going to be amazing to see how our teams do it in the end and just kind of pushing towards the goal of doing their best and just kind of keeping up that positive spirit that North applies every single year. And with the positive spirit, everyone is so excited for our prom on May 17th, which is going to be really nice, going to the Bolingbrook golf course and just gathering everything and getting ready and prepping, just seeing everybody just get together and figure out what they're going to do with the rest of the school year.
And what are you going to do, Luca, when you leave, when you graduate?
I'm going to Indiana University for accounting.
Very cool.
All right. Start recruiting.
It's
doing the right thing. It's a good school.
So at South, we've had a very busy past few weeks, but very exciting. Last week, our PE department had a wellness week, so all week long there were different activities for students to promote just living a healthy lifestyle. Some of the top two things that I liked that week, on Tuesday, they brought in a lot of different vendors from the community, people representing different organizations like a counseling company, different like drug awareness people who had a lot of candy on the table for students, but also a lot of fun activities. So that was fun just to interact with the different vendors and learn a little bit more about certain issues related to living a healthy lifestyle. And then on Friday, there also was a triathlon for students to compete in. I personally did not do it. I helped run it as a PE leader, but my younger brother did it. He said it was a lot of fun. They got a lot of free stuff just for competing in it. So it's just a fun thing that students can do. We also had our Clear Leadership Day for seniors last week. We went to a banquet hall, heard from guest speakers, had different activities to help us like learn more about the transition into college, stuff like that. We had different scenarios where we worked through with different staff members, had different conversations with other students, and kind of had to learn a little bit about the transition coming up. So that was really fun and very informational. We also had our Commitment Day celebration last week since our prom was this weekend. So we had everyone wearing their college shirts or whatever their plans were for the future. We got ice cream sandwiches through the College and Career Center to celebrate our decision, which was really nice. And then they also had a table full of free college things that you could take. So if you found your college, you could take like a banner or a shirt or whatever that they had. And we also have our senior awards ceremony on Wednesday, which will be really exciting to just honor all the accomplishments that our students have made this past 4 years. And we did have our prom on Saturday, which was super fun. It was really nice. We had like a Hollywood movie night type of theme. So there was a red carpet, there was a big archway to walk through. It was really fun. The fireworks were really beautiful that they set off at the golf course. And it was just a fun night to be with friends and kind of have the last hurrah before graduation. And then we also have AP testing coming up, which is a big stressor for students, but it is a reminder that we are almost done. So everyone, make it through. You can do it, and you can get good scores. You worked hard. So that's just what has been going on at South.
Caitlin, what are you going to do?
I'm going to Mizzou next year, and I am majoring in political science with a pre-law track.
Very cool. But I just want to say thank you, guys. This has been a very good year, and we so appreciate your input and your reports and your participation, and just thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Make sure you come the next time, because then there's cake. Just
I will note
don't
that
miss
on my
the cake.
schedule.
Yeah.
Monday night studying, y'all with friends, cake.
Counting and cake, I got everything.
That's all the food groups, right?
Okay, survey says.
All right. Hi, everybody. As I promised 2 weeks ago, I am back. Also, 2 weeks ago, I said that, the Westmont and Woodridge Park District were in our commons during resource looking for students who were looking to work over the summer. That was really successful. So we're going to broaden that community table in the commons next year for students looking for jobs. And then also the fire department and the EMTs also went over really well. Senior exit survey, students have been taking in their counseling, their final senior counselor meeting, so I'll be back to talk about that, probably over the summer or at the beginning of next year. And so, yeah, while seniors are starting to wind down, we're still winding up, getting through the end of the year. Survey results. Here we go. I was actually thinking, I was kind of like the fifth editor of the yearbook, right? That, you're talking to a lot of people, you're taking a lot of information, you end up with a big book, right? So I have all of my stuff sort of spread out here. I will try to, go at a pretty manageable pace. I'm not in a rush. I knew that I was one of the only people on the agenda. Hopefully I won't take too much of your time, but it's important. So I'm just gonna sort of go through this. Also, one of the things I was thinking of as I was putting it together,
when you student teach, right, they give you an activity, right, and I'm sure Luca and Caitlin have done this in class, where you put up agree on one wall, disagree on the other wall, and you have people split and you kind of go. That's kind of good for like primary grades when you're just trying to get them to start talking. And then sometimes you put 4 and 4 signs in each corner. It kind of develops out those choices a little bit. With high school kids, as a teacher, I would go to the stairwell and I would say, if you 100% agree with something, you stay on this landing. If you 100% disagree, go down to the floor and choose your stair. So you're going to see in the way I sort of break out the results. Sometimes I'm just showing you agree, disagree, because the results have sort of done that. You all have access to all the raw breakdown. I posted it. Anyone at home can check that out. And then sometimes it starts to break out a little bit between staff, students, and families, or maybe across the 4 grade levels. And so it's like the 4 corners. And then other times, the staff at one school versus the staff at another school versus the families of 10th graders versus the family of 12th graders versus 9th grade students. So I do the stairs. And I know that can be a little overwhelming, look at all that data, but I would rather talk through it and have everyone feel comfortable about it and have any questions that you have for me. So I'm just ready to just buckle in. All right, here we go. Okay, so this is again about the communication. And so as I sort of been breaking down the results, as the yearbook does and the newspaper does, the newspaper interviews me a lot. So I had a couple of interviews last week. And so, students are invested. There's a class for our sophomores at South that have asked a bunch of administrators to come in. So I believe I'm going in with Principal Picorni on Friday. They've already said, I've given them all of the results I've given to you, and they're studying those now to offer suggestions about what they think should happen for next year. And it's a government class, and this is part of their classroom kind of policy with Ms. Berg. So we're excited to start working with them as well. I'm starting off with the family and student response rate. This slide looks a little bit different than I did first semester. I wanted to break down the numbers so you can see who responded, what their overall responses were. So we have 4,656 students, and so obviously the same amount of families. 40% of our student population participated in the survey, and 23% of our families did. That's about 400 fewer students, mostly juniors and seniors, that did not participate in this round of the surveys. That is up about 310 families. So there was 760 families in the fall, and we're at 1,070 now. Of those families and of those students, 231 students offered a free response. And then 1,641 either skipped it, or they may have answered the question N/A, or no thank you, or something like that. Not at this time. And that's the same with families. So 216 families opted to give a free response as well. 854 either skipped it, said no, said not at this time, or thank you. And then free response overall, that's of our overall student body, so not of our overall respondents. So our 231 comments represent about 5% of the student body and about 4.6% of the families. Underneath, you can see where their responses broke down. There's also starts to show a difference between how families responded and students responded in some areas. If you look at access and resource structure, 23.4% of students' responses had something to do with access and resource. Either saying that they like their group, they don't like their group, I don't like the lessons, again, please stop the videos, or families saying, maybe some of this time could be moved back into the schedule, or I've noticed a change from when you changed the past schedule, something of that nature. So while their responses from both families and students, they do vary, I would say you start to see some differences on student concerns. that if you notice 5.2% of the students responded with some kind of concern, either saying, I could use more structure, or I would prefer to see my teachers every day, whereas 23.4% of the comments from families were around student concerns. So you can see that while families feel more strongly about the concerns around structure, or at least from those respondents, than students did. Prefers one schedule or the other, we did a sort of a breakdown. If a family member or student said, why can't we just do all block days? That fell into that category. There is actually offered quite a few different kinds of schedules under this. Some kids said, let's go back to 8 periods. And so that sort of, all of that fell down in the same category. If they didn't come out and explicitly say something about a specific type of schedule, it's not tagged there. But you'll also see that those percentages add up to more than 100% because the longer the response, the more tags it had, right? So I may have read through a comment and it said, I'd like to go back to an 8-period day. My student needs more structure. I don't know, not sure about access. And so I'm tagging it. So one comment may appear in seven different categories. I would say the trend for families had multiple tags. Trends for students, single tag. If they were going to free response, they were telling me one thing and one thing only. 10.4% of the responses from students, 13.9, didn't necessarily have something to do specifically with the schedule all of the time. Talked about concerns of not having a lunch or just assessments in general. Now my student has a lot of tests on Tuesdays. Or mentioning the period 4 switch, a couple saying like, I'm looking forward to that, others saying, I don't know, that lunch may be early. So that's kind of the breakdown for families and students. I did the same thing for staff. We have 620 staff members. That includes paraprofessionals, teaching staff, counseling staff, dean staff, all of that. 414 responded. In the fall, it was 342. So we have about 66.8% of our overall staff responding. 101 staff members offered a free response. 75% of the staff skipped it. So the overall percentage is about it represents about 16.3% of the staff. 24% of the respondents. You can see that the student concerns about accountability and behavior, similar to the families, right? 23.4%, but 43.6% of the staff had some pretty significant concerns about cell phones, homework, time, policy, things like that. If it was about resource or access, about whether or not it was a positive one about I'm seeing my students more in past days, or concerns about the lessons, or positive or negatives about students with intervention, that all fell under access and resource. If it was about time, feeling strapped for time, not feeling like I have my feet under me, that fell under instructional concerns for 25.7%. It was pretty focused on, as you can see from the data, about instructional or student concerns. We did have a few other concerns about asking about the exam schedule or suggestions for professional learning. And so, but it's the same with the staff for prefers one schedule or the other. If they specifically mentioned 8-period day, hybrid block, or offered a different version of a schedule, I also tagged them in that. And so it was about 18.8% of the comments had something like that in it. Because you seem to respond well to breaking it up by goals, I broke it up by goals again, all right? So instead of just going through, like I did last time, top to bottom, we broke it up into goals. I also worked with the teacher committee based around goals, okay? So you'll see that when I have the staff feedback committee, that there's 3 slides that are kind of placed through here. When we felt like we got to a spot where we needed to talk, we did the slide. I typed up the notes. They read over the slide before we left to to make sure that that accurately represented their thoughts. And then we did that again. We did that on Tuesday, and then we did that on Thursday. The first goal is about accessing teachers, right? How can we make sure that students have more access to teachers? I would say that the staff and the students still feel like we have ways to go on increasing that, right? Students have said that while they appreciate and they overall agree that second semester they've had more access to their teachers than they had in the past. Also, staff has agreed and their families have agreed that they have had better success. They'd still like that to continue. You'll see at the very bottom, there's been no change for my student in this area. And I did get a couple of questions. Why did I do that second semester when I didn't do overall no change first semester? In the feedback from families, every time I'd click into other, there was usually a comment from a family or a student saying, the schedule hasn't impacted my student. They turned in their homework before. Can you please place a no change or not applicable answer? That they didn't want to choose agree or disagree. And so they were choosing other, or that a family last time said at the end, I skipped several because my student was already on time and prepared for school. So you'll see that with the overall no change, I will try to point out sort of where families sat in that and also where staff sat in that, because there is a very distinct difference in a couple of the areas, specifically around homework and specifically around being advocates for themselves. The staff no change means something very different than the family's no change. Also, we asked about experience. Have you developed a good relationship? That 67.7% of the groups overall agree. 32% disagree. That it's a fairly consistent number across. I didn't highlight anything as yellow. You'll see that in some of the slides I highlight things yellow because the percentage seems out of whack with the other numbers. It's pretty consistent across the different groups, and so that is something that's positive. It's not a huge jump up, but it is something that progressed over the year this year. This is the slide that I was mentioning earlier about students and teachers feeling like, yes, I'm really glad that we made progress on student support with the PASS and that, yes, we do have more access. But if you look at the time, that time to study, right, that far outweighs, and student support with the PASS, far outweighs any of the other choices for access. That while our juniors appreciated the Khan Academy college financial aid presentations more than our freshmen, clearly, that was something very specific to that grade level. It's not a surprise that our freshmen felt better about the relationship building, and we're more appreciative about the ALICE training. They're to a new building. I want to know what I need to do in an emergency. Same thing with severe weather drills. They're 20% versus the seniors 12%. That's not surprising. And so with this, we took a break, and this is what we talked about on the committee, that we are going to continue to increase the amount of days for students and staff to connect for help. Having Wednesdays be a PASS day and then Thursdays be a lesson day is likely something that we're going to continue. That some of the things we talked about is how can we avoid some of the mistakes that we made in rollout for resource and for access that we did this year. That we started the year thinking, let's get a bunch of lessons, sort of not quote out of the way, but let's do them right off at the beginning. That was a stressor for the staff and for the students. And then also, it's possible that helped lead to some negative feelings from some students around access or resource because it was a task rather than something that they were finding value in. So some of the programming and the restructuring was more of like, not only just starting fresh, but starting like I'm overcoming a hill of something, partially of our own creation there. So in the staff, we talked about varying even the formats from the beginning. Do we do some shorter videos with staff-led discussions, some video-led? If it's like a state requirement, like media literacy, that we have to show to the state that we have done that. And then there was also a lot of talk about having student leaders like North Stars or possibly Blue Crew, or do we develop another sort of like senior group that can help lead some of those things? Whether or not it's about reminding students about academic and behavior expectations, sometimes that does come better from other students than it does from staff. We know that our Blue Crew and our North Stars do something with our freshmen during orientation, and so this would be also a good follow-up for them. Also, it helps start that bonding throughout the year. I know that Jill Erzig from Downer South has offered a proposal for like a softball tournament that she wants to do with senior access to end the year. We're in discussions about how that might work. We're hopeful that it will. But as we're working through the year, staff are volunteering. Maybe there are some ways that we can create more bonding periodically throughout the year, whether or not it's competitions against other access groups. And then also PBAS competitions to reward some of our students for expectations about academics and behavior. How can we leverage access to do that? You heard from Dr. Dement about reintegrating video announcements. That has been something that students have been talking about, and staff. The TV program is really strong at both schools, and we want to make sure that students have an opportunity to see those. So those are the committee feedback, so we're going to continue with that. And this summer, I've asked for hours from Dr. Thiele to work with staff members and some administrators to start talking through, like, if this is what we need to grow in, how can we implement that with all the voices around the table? Making sure that we're not going down a road of lessons that is overly cumbersome for the staff, but is working to address academic and behavior concerns staff have, plus engaging the students, because we do, in the end, want to continue to build on the relationships between the staff and students, and also to make sure that the students feel like they're getting as much out of it as they would in a normal class, or that it's enhancing their ability to perform in one of their classes. So before I go on, does anyone have any questions so far? Nice, okay, great. Okay, so goal 2.
I do. I'm sorry. Could you speak a little bit more about the teacher committee?
Sure.
How many representatives are there from?
So we actually had 8 teachers with me on Tuesday and about 8 on Thursday. That a lot of it was conflict-based, right? It's after school. So in the fall, I think I had about 25 staff members, and so that same group was invited. But with coaching and spring sports and all of that kind of stuff, that it was smaller than it was. Principal Lip and Principal Dement were also there, and so they weighed in. I also had a couple of chairs there, so from both schools. So there were representatives from both schools as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So here's where we start going on the staircase, okay? So when we ask the question about currently implementing deeper extended learning activities due to additional class time on those block days, you can start to see a pretty significant difference in grade levels. Okay, so our 9th graders, are sitting around 70% agree, and our seniors sitting around 46% agree. It comes out to an overall average of about 59.3 for our students versus 40% for our families. someone had asked, I've been showing, I went to exec council, I went DLT, so I've shown these slides to a lot of the leaders and also the teacher committee. And the question comes up, why is there such a difference between the families and the students? Or when we kind of look at the next slide, the teachers, the students, and the families. And I try to talk about the teachers are responding for all of the students they have in front of them. So if I have 150 students and I'm asked about my classroom, I'm answering about my classroom and all of my kids. Students are only responding from their experience, right? If we get to a question about homework or my teacher, that they're talking about their 8 teachers, not just the one teacher. And so there's already a difference there. And then some families, even in their open comments, will say, I asked my student before I filled this out, and they said, because sometimes families are only getting what the student chooses to share with them that day, whether it's positive or negative. And so also the families aren't necessarily the same families of the students who filled it out. And so there is a bit of perception that's wrapped up in all here. And so I do just want to, as we're looking at the differences, I'm not under the assumption that the 70% is a full picture, nor am I under the assumption that the 30% is a full picture. That's why I've sort of broken it out across all of those stairs. I will say that the 21%, for our seniors, that if you look at senior comments overall, that they do feel pretty strongly about it. They've had so many schedules in their high school career, and they feel that, and totally legitimate feeling. And so they absolutely have expressed that. Here, the note change, that most of the families and students with no change fall on, it feels like maybe it's 2 periods pushed together, right? So that they haven't felt that change as much. So while some families that fall on no change felt like, yes, they had that experience in the fall and they're still feeling it now, that I would say that if I were to give it, a 50-50, it weighs more on families saying that I haven't felt that yet as much as I thought I would at this point in the year. The staff, you can see it's the second question, so it's the one on the right, that we asked, are you able to implement deeper and extended learning activities on block days? And that is an overwhelmingly positive number. Now, if I went to every staff member and said, is that every block day? No, I'm right. And so that's also in part of it, that there are feelings about the difficulty of going back and forth between the 2 schedules, but they're also reflecting that, yes, I am able to make that change, that it is slightly improved from the fall. And I think partly the shift in the way we were doing professional development from first semester to second semester helped. More personalized professional learning, I think that had an impact here. But on the other side, I do think it's important to note that this is one of the most strongly disagree questions that we asked. Will I have, I'm confident that I'll be able to teach the same amount of curriculum and or skills that I have in past years. This one does tend to fall across department lines. I don't love to break out by department because I feel like it becomes oddly divisive, right? Even as I was kind of going through the school averages, I don't want it to seem like, well, south or well, north. It's just that's the way it is. But if you look at this one, you'll notice differences in the schools later in the survey, but this one's pretty consistent. And so in digging back through, that if a staff member is feeling like they're able to implement some deeper learning activities, they're also more likely to answer positively on the skills question. And then if I'm answering negatively or I'm disagreeing or strongly disagreeing with the extended learning, I'm also falling in with the strongly disagree here. So that is a concern that staff members have voiced, that it's, you know, fairly consistent from first semester as well.
So can you go back to that?
Yeah.
So this is something that just totally perplexes me, and maybe you've said this and I've just kind of missed it. But on one hand, people feel confident, or they don't feel confident, that they've been able to to teach the same amount of curriculum. But on the other hand, they feel confident that they've had success in deeper learning. So I don't get
I think,
that.
Ryan, if you go back to what you talked about at our last board meeting, some of the complexities of this.
No, so if I am, like, you know, right, BC Calc was today, right? Am I right? BC Calc was testing today. I think Physics C was also testing today. That I may have been able to implement a deeper extended learning activity, and I've been trying to do that on my block days to do it. But did I get to exactly the same spot that I did last year? It's possible that I didn't. And when I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, I didn't get to the same spot I did last year, I do, it's, you know, like I had said last week or 2 weeks ago, teaching is a calling. And you take all of those scores super personally. And that when you're going through it the first time in a different mode, you don't feel like you're getting to the same spot. And you have to teach things a little bit differently. And when you're in the moment, you're thinking you're gonna get to it, and you don't. And so you have to think, how am I teaching this skill differently? I don't have the same review that I was able to do before. And so you do feel a little bit of a cumulative effect for it. In 2 slides, you're gonna see something that I think will help break down the understanding. Here, it's pretty consistent across the way, right? This also ties into what we were just sort of talking about here. If I feel like I'm not going to be able to get all of the same skills in or get all of the same curriculum in, I am going to push through, right? Because I want to make sure that I'm getting to it. And, you know, I know that some people will say that it's only sequential courses probably feel that way. Not the case. That there are, I did do a breakdown of different departments and kind of where they sat with certain numbers. I was surprised by them. Again, because I didn't want to like break people up by departments. I would say that it's not all the sequential courses that feel negatively about that, and it's not all humanities courses that feel the opposite. It is kind of a mix. I would say that lab courses are finding more of a positive reaction. Our PE staff, you know, and so, but this one, again, because you're not seeing your teacher every day, or because you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm hitting 2 topics in a day, the families and students have clearly reported that they're feeling that. Yep.
So, and I was trying to, as I was looking at these, to Nancy's point, some of it seemed like it was contradictory.
Yeah.
So for this one, it's saying that it's not, you're pretty high, that it was not that they feel, it feels like 2 periods rather than deeper and rich. And then if I go back to the other slide, I didn't feel like that.
So the difference between what the staff, so I'm able to implement deeper and extended learning activities, that yes, they are able to do it, and they are doing it, they feel regularly. And so is that regular practice always making it home? Or is the student seeing it in every class? And so I think that does impact perception, right? If on my Wednesday, I am feeling like I'm getting deeper learning activities, but in my classes on Thursday, I feel like I'm not. It's hard because I'm not asking them about every individual class. They're answering about their classes. And so that perception is also part of it, because I'm only talking about my classes as a teacher and I'm doing it. But that student is not with me 8 periods of the day. And so that is part of it as well.
Right, a student that's having a deeper learning, richer experience in 6 of their 7 might answer this as no, they're not, because it's not in every class, or 5 of their 7, right? They could be pulling out the one where they don't feel that way rather than the majority of the ones in which they do.
Especially if they're not doing well in the class, and that's the class that they feel like is doing the opposite. Or conversely, they're being really successful in a class, and because of that, even though the other ones may not be, they're going to be responding positively.
So does this give us kind of a true?
So that's why I ask multiple questions. All right, so here we go with benefits and challenges from staff, right? So this is staff that have said that they're implementing deeper activities, right? And so if you look across the staff average, it's about 57%. I think it's like 57.1. Moderately agree, or strongly agree. And then you come to, well, with the extended periods, I have more time to engage my students in discussions, workshops, projects. You start to see a pretty big difference between the schools, and it's only 40%. And so it makes you wonder, why is that so different? You can see that I try to get to the question in several different ways. So the first one is about activities in that block. The second one is about structure in that block. And then the third one is about rigor or intervention within that block. And so you can see that they're feeling better about the strategies than they are about the making sure that that structure is under their belt, and then also with the difficult lessons. And so that as a teacher, I may have chosen 1, 2, or all 3 of these, or I may have chosen none. I'm like, yes, I'm doing that, but am I choosing this as a benefit? Because I was able to choose as many as I wanted to on that. And so I think the main division here is that it's talking about the specific aspects of what does that deeper, enriching experience look like. Okay. Goal 3 was about reducing stress. This actually section's a little short. So, and then there's a staff feedback. So now that we've experienced the schedule for most of the year, I feel like I've adapted well to the schedule at this point. Again, it's a pretty high number, especially I think when you think about the strongly disagree here about the teaching the same amount of curriculum and or skills, right? That they're starting to get used to the ebb and flow of the week, but are they fully there yet? No, right? But they've definitely said that they've adapted better to the schedule, and it is slightly improved from the fall. Here's where we start to see a pretty significant difference. And you'd think that there wouldn't be such a difference because it's like numerically provable, right? That I could, if I collected all of the students' names who took the survey, which we don't, and tagged it to their absences during the school year, we'd be able to see it. Now, students overall across the board, so 55.8% of them overall agree that they have fewer absences and are more engaged at the beginning of the day. Here's the overall no change where I say it's very different between the staff and the families. In the first survey when we asked families and they were saying, please give us a no change option or a not applicable option. The response that went with it is my student, no matter what the schedule is, my student will be present and engaged each day. And so for families and for students that respond to the survey, right, more of our compliant students who I asked them to fill out the survey, so they filled it out, are going to be represented in that 1,872. And so they are going to agree, yes, I come to school on time, and yes, I do my homework. Now, opposite staff, this is one of the first questions where we get a 0%, right? So strongly agree at North, 0 teachers chose it, and only 1.5% of the South staff. And this one, sitting at 68.5%, as overall disagree. And that no change is, no, I was concerned about absences before, I'm still concerned about absences now. And so there is a fairly significant swing between perceptions of families and students on the survey than it is with staff on the survey.
So I'm sorry, are you saying for that staff's perception is that there are more absences and tardies?
That they strongly disagree that there's fewer absences and tardies and that they're more engaged at the beginning of the day. They disagree with that statement.
With that statement. And that, because the no change would be, it's the same as it used to be.
Same as
Yeah.
Okay.
It was bad in the fall and it's still bad.
Yes.
It's kind of bad.
That, and I will say that, I mean, since we brought it up, that teachers, when I speak with them, many of them talk about that being a big struggle about how can I do deeper learning activities if
Kids
they're
aren't
not there, and if they're in their phones, and so I think not doing their homework. So I do think that those 3 factors, and you'll be able to see this on the staff feedback here, that the first bullet, so at this point I paused the data and I said, how are we feeling now? And they're like, okay. And this is when it came up that the homework absences and phone issues are affecting classroom instruction possibilities, that we need to revisit our grading procedures, our homework procedures, our retake procedures, to make sure that we are keeping students accountable as they navigate their additional freedoms. Oh yeah, go ahead.
So you're saying that a student is going to do the same type of work whether we start at the earlier time or at a later time? Is that basically
so
what we're
I think the staff
getting
is
at?
saying that they have not noticed a change with kids being absent, that it was a struggle last year. It's still a struggle. And if they miss on a block day, it feels doubly bad. Now, I will say that Kelly and Karen, Dr. Zerner and Dr. Taylor did a an absence analysis for first semester. Our highest absent rate date is on a Tuesday, which was a surprise. We thought it would be a block day or Friday. So we're going to check that again to see if it continues to be Tuesday. Now, I don't also know that some families have said that it now feels like Tuesday is the day I give most of my tests. And so is that now also why we're having higher absences on Tuesday? I don't know that answer. But I suppose that could be something that factors into it for some students. But I think overall, one teacher talked to me after the meeting was over and said, it's just that at first we looked at grading procedures, and then we started to change the space, and then people started to shift the way they do business, like, students, and it changed coming out of the pandemic, and then we came back, and then we're doing a new schedule. And so taking the time to look at how all of 5 of those things work together, new space, new schedule, grading, homework, retake, to make sure that we're not creating icebergs, right? That if there's something in a policy that is impacting, in a procedure that's impacting instruction, then let's look at that procedure and what adjustments do we need to make. And so that's something that they felt pretty strongly about. Also, interventions during resource with students. We talked about this quite a bit, and it also crossed over to the second day. And so this is where I think families and teachers feel it the most. Students have not reported that, but that doesn't surprise me, because again, the students that are reporting on the survey also are likely not having excessive absences or Ds and Fs in 2 or more courses. So we have talked about, do we have a specific intervention for students that structures some of their time and resource because they have excessive absences? Do we do it by missing assignments? Should we do it by the DNF report that we already run? And what is that entrance and exit criteria? How do we identify that? If we identify it by Ds and Fs in a course, that is a very different reporting than if we do it by missing assignments. If we do it by missing assignments, how do we make sure that it's for students who are missing assignments that impact our ability to say whether or not they have mastered the content that's required for this course, rather than a couple of assignments, like I did really well on the test, that was a daily homework assignment. Like there might be 1 or 2 of those, but I don't know if that student would be up for intervention for that type. Or is it a combination of all of them? And then, when we got into the second day, it was like, how do we staff it? Where is it going to be? And so those questions are a little bit harder, but again, as we're looking at, that's my second committee this summer, and I'll be reaching out to staff to see who would like to be on that, is specifically talking about investigating interventions so that we can start the year with something for students who need that structure. And then also, aside from interventions, that some families and some students actually said, I would love if my study hall were in a smaller environment. Instead of having the study hall in the Commons for freshmen, should it be in a smaller classroom so that they get used to using that time to study because they're in a classroom environment and that's the classroom is where they're doing most of their work. Or for our students who have said that they could use a more quiet, structured space during resource, that if the library is full, what is our second spot for that, so that students can use that time in a quiet way. And so those were some of the conversations that we were having as a staff. I would say that our conversations around the first 2 bullets were the deepest, because I think that sometimes the interaction of the questions tells more of a story than the individual questions do. And so that's why we were stopping after every couple of slides in order to kind of dig into that a little bit. Yeah, does anyone have any questions at this point before we move to the next spot? Okay. All right, so goal 4 was about social emotional learning, also college and career planning, also about students being able to have the opportunity for student choice. So here we're on the sort of 2 sides of the room, right? There was a lot of agreement in these areas. If you, again, look at the breakdown, and I just want to mention again for the readers at home, that you can go and download any of them. It has all of the breakdowns if you want to see how these numbers are made up. If you've, now that you've experienced it for most of the year, how am I using the resource time more effectively? Students overwhelmingly have reported that they are using it more effectively. That was also an uptick in our seniors. Typically, I was seeing a huge difference between our freshmen and our seniors. That gap wasn't as strong here. And then also the no change, right? There were some students that felt like, no, I'm sitting on my phones. And some students are like, no, I've been using it. So the 10% is a little bit more evenly split. The families still, I think, based on their comments, feel a little bit more strongly that many of their students need more structure in that. And so whether or not that's like the SAT prep during resource that we're offering where parents can sign their students up for it, we're also thinking about, do we do a career cluster sign up where parents can, may not be for every career, but we're going to do this career cluster in this month. And is that sign up in resource, is that structure kind of meeting the needs of everyone? We're making sure that the college and career planning is happening for students who need that structure, other students who are using their freedoms well can, other students that we need for intervention, that we can pull them from it. And so it seems as if that choice layer is going to become more and more prominent rather than drop in, because students have reported that sometimes I fully intend to go. And then life happens. And so, or I forget by the time the announcement happened till I got to resource, which also has happened. The next part is about building in structure for seeking help from a teacher, counselor, social worker. Again, very positive response. This question is new. I don't have baseline data on growth from this one. This is just, do I have the opportunity to seek it out? I think that we've talked with CSSS that would feel that if we can come up with a structure where we're more available during resource time and flex their professional learning time to a different period, is that something that we could do? I think that number would even go up from there. And so, as I meet with CSSS next week and the week after, so I think next week at South, the week after at North, when we're working through the access and resource schedule, I know that that's going to be on the docket there. I've broken this out with the averages again because it's vastly different between the three groups. So student advocacy on the left and missing assignments on the right. And you can see that the overall agree from the staff that these are some of the lowest numbers that we see across the survey. And yet, overall agree about self-advocacy and time management from the students is on the higher side that we see throughout the survey. As we talked with the staff, a couple of the staff members said, maybe we need a lesson on what time management and better self-advocacy is, because it seems like we're working from different definitions. I do think part of it is, based on, am I getting my work done and do I feel good about it from a student's perspective? And then from a staff perspective, if I'm thinking about all of my students, how many of them would I say were functionally independent with self-advocacy and time management? And I think that is a difference, but nonetheless, that is something that we need to work on. We have to also bridge that gap between what's going to be the format that's going to engage the staff and the students in that discussion in access, because me producing a video on time management skills ain't gonna do it. And so, that's part of it. And I do think that having our seniors, I was part of the opening staff for Mattia Valley in 2009. We only had sophomores and freshmen to start off. And we quickly found out that our sophomores were far behind in their ability to do many of these things because they were 8th graders in 8th grade, so they're king of the hill. They went to a freshman center where they're the only class, so they're king of the hill. They came to Mattia where they were the king of the hill Junior year, they were king of the hill. So by the time they got to senior year, many of them started seeing friends not get into the school that they wanted for the first time, not getting the scholarship. The sophomores were becoming captains of the teams, all of those kinds of things. And that was a tough lesson for them. And we had to start really explicitly working some of those skills into our classes. Doing a career unit in English was something that we did to get them to understand, like, GPAs matter. I know you don't think it does as a first semester sophomore, but it does. And so some of those senior lessons that you kids pick up is something where I feel like if we're going to really use our senior leaders and access, that this is a great way of doing some of those things. Because until when you have an elderly gentleman like myself say it, that it doesn't hold that much weight, because I graduated in 1989 from high school. High school was totally different back
Shut
then.
up.
Well said, Terry.
It was 1989. Yes, Tiananmen Square happened on my graduation day, June 1st, 1989. Karen, that was for you, a good date pull out. And so, also for homework, right? When you start missing assignments, sometimes our younger grades don't feel that as much, and some of our seniors know what it's like to dig yourself into a hole and have some advice that they're going to listen to more. And so I do think as we look back at, I know the staff feedback was for the first goal was much earlier in the presentation. I do think that this is going to play out specifically in Access next year, specifically for our younger grades.
Well, I think some of that is life skills. You know, if they can understand how to dig themselves out, you know, they can use that their whole lives, so.
Not put themselves in that position to begin with.
Yes, yeah. But give them the skills to do that, and if we can do that in classroom situations, I think that that would be a huge plus.
Yes, and for students who can't pick it up there, then we put in the interventions and resource. And for the students who can't pick up interventions and resource,
go.
how does that, when it comes to like a Scott Tier 3 MTSS structure where, sorry, I'm using a lot of jargon, multi-tiered systems of support. Tier 3 is a student who's not getting it in the classroom. They're not getting it in a sort of overall intervention, and now you need something very, very specific for your needs. And so, but we do think that with a mixture of access and some intervention structures and resource, that we should catch most of the kids. Yeah,
targeted.
So this one, actually, I put this slide in specifically because of the drastic swings between groups, okay? That between our seniors and freshmen on some of the questions, there's a 20% swing, some of it's only 15%. So for example, benefits and challenges for students. With the extended periods, I've had more time to prepare for and complete assessments. 55% of our freshmen chose that as a benefit of the schedule, and only 30% of our seniors did. And that's a pretty big difference. I would say one significant contributor is likely AP courses. The difference between the course load that you take as a student in AP courses your senior year versus the slate that you may take as a freshman is likely going to have an impact on there. And then I also highlighted the imbalance, right? The imbalance is you're feeling it more as a senior than you are as a freshman. And also families are feeling it more than their freshman students or their senior students are. That I do think that also, just to highlight, I didn't highlight any of the boxes, but the very last one about students socializing and using their phone during resource instead of accessing a teacher, that students recognize that it's a bit of a problem for them. The parents recognize it, and the staff, this is the highest unanimity among the staff is the very bottom line about students socializing with their friends and using their phones instead of seeking out help from them during resource. So this is the highest number across any question across the survey, both semesters. And so I know that there's been a lot of work on the phone procedures, and I think that other people will kind of talk about where we're at with that. But I would say that this one kind of works in connection. I think last time I talked about late start, we weren't watching students on their phones kind of like in their beds or like waiting for their rides or hanging with, whatever, when it was a late start. But if they're not doing their homework and they're on the phones in your class and you walk through the commons and you see that they're not doing your work there, you feel that. And so I think in working interventions and looking at our grading procedures and homework procedures, I think that will help those numbers a little bit. But again, those are some tough conversations that students, one teacher told me as I was walking through, she said, well, I had a student, I went up to her desk and I said, so do you own that phone or does that phone own you? And she said, oh, the phone owns me and I'm okay with it. She kissed her phone and she put it down on her desk. Now, I said, were you able to refrain from laughing? Because that's a pretty hilarious comment from a student, but also upsetting. It is that students recognize it, our families recognize it. And so looking at that, I think, is something that's important, right? Because I don't think our families want us to have teachers be saying, like, put your phone away, put your phone away, put your phone away.
Can we scramble them?
I don't know. No. That's a touch point though. And I think if you asked any staff member that they would agree that that's a touch point for sure. And then also if a student misses on a block day, catching them up, right?
Yeah.
That if I'm like reworking my plans and all that, to then have a student miss that day and help that student catch up, that can be overwhelming for sure.
So I have a question, and for the record, I'm looking at my phone because my notes are on my phone.
Oh, that's okay.
Actually, I wanted to interject that because I think that's an assumption that people jump to right away. Do students ever use their phones for work? Because you probably noticed me on my phone tonight too. I've been making some notes about what we're doing. I've been playing some game or something, right?
That's all right.
I think that we do tend to, when we see somebody with a phone, that they're not paying attention. In fact, they may be paying attention. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind in the discussion.
I'd say, I made notes from what you were talking about tonight to see if you hit them, and I also keep my password on. But it does not stop me from looking at other stuff. When I go to it, I got all kind of crap popping up all the time, so it will make me.
For sure.
There's no easy
sure.
answer to any of this, right?
I'm
Yes,
being honest.
it can be a productive tool. Yes, it can be a distraction. Overall, I think most people will tell you it's designed to distract, to grab your attention away from what you're
Agreed.
doing and focus it on that. One thing that you can be sure of is they're not going away. That our students will become adults in adult settings and we'll have to learn to manage it just as all of you have been doing during the board meeting tonight. We share responsibility with our families in helping students learn how to navigate that world that involves these devices, right? That we share a part of the responsibility in that. Yet at the same time, like what Ryan said, our teachers' attentions can't be distracted 24/7 by those devices, right? They have
Correct.
work to do in class. You can see there's a lot of frustration about being able to get through the activities and materials and things that they have planned. Our teachers spend a lot of time being very professional and strategic about the things that they want to do in their classroom, and it frustrates you, right? You yourself are looking at how you are doing this, but if you're a classroom teacher with 24 to 32 kids in your classroom, it's 32 or 24, whatever different experiences going on that you as a classroom teacher are trying to manage, on top of all of the other classroom things you're trying to manage. So it's a compounding, I think, variable that has been introduced into the classroom, especially following the fact admittedly, for 2 years, we told kids, get on your phone because
Right.
that's where school is,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And now you're saying, get off your phone
off
because
your
that's
phone.
not where
Right.
school is, right?
Right.
So there's so many interwoven factors, as Ryan tried to point out today, that on their own, a kid with a phone taking notes in class is not distracting, right? But it can be. And when you factor in all the other changes that have happened in society and in schools and everything else, it makes it a very complex situation to try to sort through. And for a teacher that's trying to do that for, 20-plus students in their class, at the same time that they're trying to do what they planned on doing in that class,
Yeah.
it's very difficult what we're asking teachers to do right
Very,
now.
very.
So, yes, for me, it doesn't seem like that much of a distraction. I'm an adult that can manage it most of the time, right? But for 20-plus teenagers,
It is.
it's a lot to manage.
Oh, I'm sure.
But we share a responsibility in helping them learn how to do that. So it's not an all or nothing thing that we're in here. It's complex.
It's not, but isn't it also telling that the families rate is about 40%? I think that's a problem. The students are closer to 30-ish% and the teachers are almost at 90.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, and I for some reason on the basketball day, I thought school day ended at noon. So I started texting my niece, Emily, hey, are you going to take in the bus? We had a full out conversation, right? And then I found out later, school day ended at 12:30. And so then I had to have a very tough conversation. Why were we able to have a full out conversation while you were in class? That just happens. And so whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, right, that there is contact between home and students during class. And then they're also doing other things, so that I do think that, that anytime that you start working through a new procedure, specifically around something that everyone feels very strongly about, I think everyone acknowledges across the world right now that there's a phone problem, but it's not easy to lock all of that down. Because you're right, like I'm a late adopter in technology. I don't have my phone with me now. People text me. They all know if you need to get a hold of me, they call my husband and he answers because he's always on his phone, and I am not. But he also takes care of everything that we need to buy or anything, and I don't do any of that. And he does it all on his phone. So I'm the receiver of the benefits, right? He's the benefactor on that. So yeah, I mean it's a tough one. And so I think that as we grapple with students and their freedoms, right, that not all of the students are going to love like being pulled back on the phones or using interventions. But I do think that with putting structures in place and seeing that if I do that right thing, or if I'm doing this thing, or if I don't do this now, I can do this that is just retraining those behaviors. And so how do all of those things work together?
Well, and that's my question, I guess, which was actually not about my phone. But I was just making an excuse because of the fact that I keep my notes on my phone.
I didn't mean to make everyone so self-conscious about your phones. I'm sorry.
Well, we're having a conversation.
Well, yeah. But my question was this. I mean, again, this is what I kind of struggle with after having looked at the raw data. And
Yeah.
so we have students who feel they're better able to prepare during their day.
Mm-hmm.
But we have both staff who feels that there's too much downtime. And then in the data elsewhere, both students and staff felt they had non-productive time.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just trying to figure that out.
Sure.
If they're not using that time to prepare better, but they're better prepared overall.
So for students with that's so in creating an intervention, you just want to make sure that you're not just making a decision that like takes everything, like when we're pulling back on autonomy, all the kids were like, ugh, right? Because like, and I said, okay, if everyone does what you need to do for third quarter, I will start putting back an autonomy. So there was an autonomy for juniors last week. I think there's one for sophomores next week. I think there's one for freshmen the week after that. And that is because like that you follow the past procedures, there's less people cutting fine, we will put those things back in there. But you don't want to do a sweeping one, right? So for our kids who are using it well and can manage that time, we want to make sure that they still have that time. But for students who aren't, whether or not they start getting D's or F's in their classes, they start missing multiple days, right? For students who are chronically truant, we need to make sure that we have them in a space where we can get them caught back up. And what does that look like? How long will they be in that intervention so they can earn their way out? And there's a connection between, I have this space because I'm doing what I need to do. And that it's not, we're not trying to kill the love of school for students. And so there really does have to be a direct, because this is happening, this is happening. Because as soon as you lose that string, it's just, you don't like me and I don't like it here. So we have to balance that line of making sure that students who are, all of their homework turns in, they're on time. They should be able to go to the coffee bar and hang out in the commons and use their phones if they want to, because they're all caught up. And if students, are using their time really well outside of school, and they're passing their classes, and great. But if they're not, then when they're with us, what are the structures that we should put in place in order to help teach them that so they can graduate out of those interventions and then experience that space like the students who maybe didn't need an intervention to get there?
So those structures, to be determined, would be, like, the teacher would refer them for that? Or they would institute some of those, or a mixture of both?
Yeah, so that's working with the staff on it. So if I am running, I'm not to get into the weeds on like how we run reports or whatever, but if I'm running an intervention based on missing homework assignments, that is something that's a teacher referral, because it's not just about the number of assignments that are missed. It is, how is this showing evidence of their learning, which helps me make their grade, right? If there's too many of those, that would be a teacher referral. If we're only doing it on if a student has 2 or more D's or F's, that's a report we can run that I can, that.
So we have a couple.
So yes, and so I think it depends on where that committee falls, how many different, things that it's definitely not going to be a Ryan sit in a room and come up with a procedure. There's going to be more people at the table than that.
Too bad.
Well, yeah.
I just want to point out, part of the reason we made this change was we knew students were graduating from our schools and did not feel prepared in how they managed their time. To think that we would start this year and students would magically, coming off of a pandemic, know how to be effective. We were hearing from our 18-year-olds that were leaving us that this was a spot that they struggled with. So to think that our 14-year-olds joining us this year would be great in this time would be folly.
Okay.
At the same time, that hour and a half resource time, I will point out what we pointed out last week, was the hour and a half that before was Monday morning, and nobody knew what was happening at that time, right? So once again, if that student the whole year went and saw their counselor once, over all of that time over the course of the year, instead of eating Captain Crunch on Monday morning, it was more productive over the course of the school year than what it was in the past, right? So we look at this through the lens of educators and parents, and like, we want perfection out of our students. We want them continually using their time productively. We don't even hold ourselves to those same standards as adults, that 100% of our time is going to be productive, nor should it be, right? There's a mental health aspect of this, there's a time management, there's a social aspect of this. When you talk to our students about how scheduled they are over the course of the day, do you have time to hang out with your friends? No, I don't. I leave school, I go to this practice, I go to this trainer, I sit down, I do homework, I have no time to socialize. If they're getting some of that interaction during that time, it's a plus. And we also know that, as I've shared with the board multiple times this year, we do have a segment of our students that have nowhere to be safe in this world other than in our space. And if that is 78 minutes a week where they feel safe and taken care of And that's their 7 to 8 minutes a week that they get to pick what they do with it. Whether it's on their phone or otherwise, for that kid, that is time well spent for that kid. So we are making overarching, very broad statements about what's happening for all of our students and our teachers here. We also have to acknowledge for certain numbers of our students, they're getting exactly what they need. Maybe they're not, but what Ryan's talking about is the pathways to make sure we're continually looking at this and getting better in all of those ways for all of our kids. But we have to acknowledge that we're making pretty broad-reaching statements here as we look at perception data, right? People are picking something on a scale of perceptions, and we're looking at it. That's why the information Ryan's about to get into, to preview, he's going to look at some longitudinal data here and what we learned from the first time to the next time. That's going to be very telling data for us over the next several years of where are we making progress in these areas, where aren't we, where are concerns remaining as we look at this data over time. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Wow, thanks. So before I get into longitudinal data, I just have one more section. So this one is about increased time for teachers in professional learning, planning with their colleagues. So, positive on all of them. 54% agreed or overall agreed about having more dedicated professional learning time in the schedule. Right, there's other things that we do during that time, whether it's course team time or building meeting or something like that. But from the adjustments that we made, we saw overall growth. So through personalized professional learning, this question is new for second semester. First semester, we put on hold personalized professional learning as we tried to do building learning and getting used to the schedule. And then we brought back PPL for second semester. That was a huge positive. In fact, many teachers in the first survey talked about how they wished we had started PPL in first semester. And then at this point in the year, we've been on our journey with Common Experience, and that how confident are they that they will be able to complete their work. 77.9% agree with that, and that's a slight uptick from the fall as well.
Ryan?
Yeah.
So this one kind of surprised me, that 29.4% felt that they strongly overall disagreed, that they have more dedicated time for professional learning in this schedule. Why would somebody, I'm trying to, and it's not that there's no change because so these are people who are saying that they have less time.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
So I do think that the professional learning that we did in a late start, right, all of the staff is together. Yep. And now their professional learning is broken into whichever lunch period they had on a Monday, Tuesday, Friday day. So Rob and I are on the same course team. He has lunch 5th, I have lunch 6th. He's doing his professional learning 5th, and I'm doing my professional learning 6th. In PPL, sometimes we're on a course team, we're choosing the same professional learning because we want to grow in the same area because we're on the same course team. That having that divide and not being able to do the learning with him at the same time, that is a stress factor for some teachers. Not everyone is doing it that way. Some work with an instructional coach, and so their professional learning isn't tied to really anyone else, but others work in teams. And so I would say that staff members that disagree with that by not having the professional learning with everyone at the same time, they've felt an impact on that.
Okay.
The other thing is we have students in the building during that time, so things happen, right?
Sure.
Where before you do it on Monday morning, there were no students here. Now school is going on while they're professional learning, and there's things that happen that draw you away from that. So depending on your role and your responsibilities and the students you're responsible for, you can get torn between those things.
And I would also say for departments like CSSS, they're participating in the building-wide professional learning. And at times, they've voiced that I don't feel like this fits my role as well as it maybe fits the teaching staff role. And so earlier in the presentation, I talked about, when I meet with them, that we may be talking about how do we flex their learning a little bit different, if that's possible. And that, I think, also answers some of the professional learning, like my dedicated professional learning time. Well, for my role, I feel like I have less because we're looking at a block teaching and I am not a classroom teacher. But this was my professional learning time. And so how do we differentiate that for groups that are not teaching staff but are staff in the building?
I think you have some, we'll get to it, right? Like
Yeah.
some thoughts on how we
Yes.
address it. Because my reason for asking the question, I think it's important. I would like to see 100% agree there. I think it's absolutely essential that our staff feels that they've got enough time to do the professional learning that they need to do.
And I think earlier when I talked about things that I wish I could go back and do differently from the fall, right? Or that we as all of us could have done differently about spacing things out. I think as, Rob leads the professional learning across and talking about how are we spacing that out as well. So just like I'm looking at spacing drills out, spacing lessons out,
Okay.
That Rob has been developing a schedule with the leadership team about what are the priorities, how are we limiting them, and then also hopefully I'm not stealing your presentation from you, am I?
I'm not on the schedule
Okay,
to
that's
present.
okay, fine. Sorry, I'm just like.
I'm not gonna feel bad.
Off the cuff, that how do we know that, okay, we're spacing out department time, so there's equal time for that, and also PPL, and then also building learning. So, when I'm looking for EL learning, I'm already going to be put in a cycle, so it's not building learning, course team time, now PPL. It's being planned for spreading out now.
Thank
So
you.
was it maybe more compressed this year because they didn't do it in the first semester?
So I
Or
think,
no?
so the PPL was more compressed second semester and building was compressed first semester. And so the staff, because they get to choose their topic that's most applicable for them in their classroom, they want that and they want it spread out throughout the year. And so that's something that we're working on.
That's actually a really good point that you bring up, Jenny, is their personalized professional learning, the whole design around it is that they focus on one topic over a long period of time with multiple touch points. This year, because we were adjusting to this schedule, we moved all of that to second semester. So while the intent on the goal of learning is to spread it out over a long period of time, they actually only experience that within the second semester. Yeah. So that might be why their perception is I have less time, because I didn't get that full experience across the entire year.
So you have certain topics that they can pick?
They choose.
And then, yes, that
Yep.
they can pick.
Yep.
And then it just spreads it out every Monday for
It
8
used-
weeks
It used
or
to.
something like
It
that.
used to be Mondays, now it falls on their
Or-
PD period in the
Yeah.
schedule. Yep.
Maybe it's a Tuesday, but
Yeah, exactly.
it goes on. Okay. All right, that's good.
Thank you.
So there were benefits and challenges for the staff and also for families around, for staff, because it was goal 5 is all staff. And so I put them back to back with the benefits and the challenges so you can see that there is a pretty, there's a divide among people's experiences. So I appreciate the expended planning time on block days. 67.9% of the North staff chose that. That was one of the highest benefits the staff chose there. But then I'm having difficulty adjusting my curriculum in their courses, which is their planning, right? 33% chose that as a challenge in the schedule. It basically comes out to about 100%. And so you can see that it sort of goes back and forth, that you can break it down where, again, that there does seem to be trends across departments. But I've given the school averages here. Oh, sorry, before I get to that. I also want to just point out that I didn't think that I would be doing this until I started kind of digging through the data. I do find that on the challenges and benefits between the two buildings, that here is where you start to see a pretty discrepant, kind of thing. So when I talked with the committee, there were North and South teachers there at both committee, and they said, like, oh, I would want to know, like, why is it so different? So I am going to go to both schools and just show them some slides, although, again, everyone has access to all of the materials. It's all posted. I do want to sit down with staff members specifically on these results and say, like, why do you think that is that there's such a difference? Because, while, yes, it may be that 73% of the North staff answered this question and 80% or 82% of the South staff, I don't think there's enough of skipped versus answered to account for that large percentage. And just as a side note, over the next week or two, I'll be talking with a lot of staff members at both schools and just pulling up a slide and saying, like, why do you think that is? That there's such a difference, because our staff, they do talk across buildings, and so just hoping to get a little bit better insight into that. So at this point, we had finished all of the goal questions, and so we talked again, so now what are you feeling? And so talking about the PD specifically for CSSS, and then also one of the staff members asked about, is there a way that we can make sure there's more alignment between professional development? Because at times there's a different topic at one school than there is for another. Obviously, our APIs and our principals are helping with our instructional specialists, trying to come up with professional development that is specific to their building. Is there a way that we can ensure that? And Rob, like I had said, had done an activity to try to align our topics a little bit more for next year so that it doesn't feel like anything's new. We're building on something. Also, the shifts in resource came up, and specifically more structures. We talked about how do we do more sign-up things. We talked about the career exploration. Also, better utilizing peer tutoring and resource that came up. How do we, in asking the question to students, I didn't put that in the slide because it didn't seem, most students said that they were unaffected by the schedule and how they chose their courses for next year. However, there was a percentage, about 10% across different grade levels, that said, I'll be signing up for something, whether or not I'm going to be an aide or find some kind of service opportunity within the school day. So we'd like to tap into those kids for peer tutoring during resource as another way for students to better use that time. And then also there was a lot of talk about how do we offer a more engaging activity that will prevent kids from thinking, oh, early release, that they think more about how do I stay connected to my community, right? Someone said when we went to high school, school was like Friday Night Lights, like every week, right? That, like everyone wore all the, at York, we all wore the green and it was all, a thing. And it seemed like homecoming Fridays every week, right? And that has changed. And that, if students have an opportunity for early release, and they're in good standing, juniors and seniors, that they have that opportunity. And so what, beyond the academic ones, what other opportunities can we have, much like the competitions that we were looking to do quarterly in Access? What are some things that we can do with our students? And so that will be, a conversation for Dr. Zerner, Dr. Taylor, and Mr. Mirandola and Ms. Martinez and I, as we kind of work that out. And then also when we are talking interventions, that committee will also look at what are some other activities that we can offer. When we look at the interventions, that we continued the conversation, because this is now after looking at most of the data all the way through. We talked about guided resource and guided study. Do we look at a model that we had used before? I believe South is using something of a guided resource right now, if I'm correct, Principal Lip? Yes. And then also we talked about just the structures of it, right? How do we refer it through the counselors through alpha teams? Because we're looking at student choice software where it's going to make it so much easier for students to choose where they want to go during certain accesses. Is there a way that we can use that to identify a student who has early release or not? Is there a way we can use that to identify a student who's been put into an intervention so that it's all kind of filtered through an app that we can easily check those things from? So it became day 2, and after all of the data, it sort of got into the, getting into the nuts and bolts of how. And so there needs to be far more people around the table for that. Tomorrow we have executive council where all of the APs and building leadership and district leadership are there. And so I'll be starting to ask them like who would like to be on what committee before I start reaching out to the staff and ask who would like to be on those committees, so I can lock down what my funding is going to be and who's going to be working on what. And we'll be doing that work while I'm doing summer school. What? By the way, sign up for summer school if you haven't signed up yet.
So those were comments from your small group where you said
Yes.
you had about eight people from each?
Yes, I would say though that the interventions that comes out in the free response from a lot of the staff.
Okay.
So the need for intervention from families and for staff, that this is a conversation that sort of started with the comments that rolled into committee. So there were other benefits and challenges that were on the survey that didn't fit under a goal. I call them stamina, focus, and flexibility. So starting off with students and families, you can see about better managing the homework load, the 20% difference between seniors and freshmen, and then also the 20% difference in their families. So the percentage, while the students still skew higher, it's interesting that it's about the same if you look at the gap between the two. The bottom I put on, I was trying to highlight anything that sort of skewed above 30% as we get into the summative data. But here, those bottom 4 challenges, I was intrigued by the inverse, relationship that students, if they don't see it as a concern, I have too much time during my day, right? 14% of the freshmen versus 23% of the seniors feel like they have too much extra time in their day, versus 53% of the freshman families and 50% of the senior families. That, the difference, it's pretty much across the board. If the families don't see it as much of a concern, the students do. If the students don't see it as a concern, the families do. And that inverse relationship is just an interesting one. But I think that, it's always good to err on the side of structure. So we're still going to be looking at the structures, and that students who are doing well with their free time, that they won't be impacted by the interventions, but the students that are struggling with it will be. And this is, again, I put this up there not because it gave me a ton of information. I'm still going to have to go and talk with the staff, but the appreciating the variety, right? There's a 20% swing between north and south, and then also the level of exhaustion at the end of the day, 61% at south and only 47.5% at north, and so that one, I'm going to have to dig into as well. So I did an overall summaries, and this is based on fall to now data. I took questions that we asked in common. So if I've asked it in the fall and I asked it again, I put both of them there. So first two columns are staff, fall, then now. Second two are students, fall, now. Third, families, fall, now. I highlighted it green if there was progress on that goal. I highlighted it yellow if it was neutral, and I highlighted it red if it went back. If you look at, Access and I have developed a good relationship, right? 69%, whereas in the fall it was 52.3%. So that's a pretty significant jump, right? That's expected. They know each other better. They've sort of gotten in a rhythm. The freshmen in their Access that are going to have those teachers for the other 3 years, right? They're investing in those relationships. And then our senior Access teachers will have freshmen next year. Also, about adapting well to the schedule at this point, it was 55% agree. Now we're at 60% agree. So it's a 5% increase, which, I think over the course of this year, I'm pretty happy with that percentage increase. And then we start getting into the yellows and no changes, right? So deeper learning activities, 49%, and now it's 51.5%. I could have highlighted that green, but I also thought, it's pretty close. It's within my margin of error, and so I sort of left that there. Also, you can see with the families and the students that because of the no change there, that while, the percentage may have stayed the same or slightly dipped or something like that. Until I have more no change data, I didn't want my slide to unnecessarily skew positive or negative. I just wanted the results to speak for themselves. So I highlighted it yellow. The professional learning, so it was building level professional learning in the fall, and it was personalized professional learning in the spring. You can see that huge jump. So I do acknowledge that the jump is going from building level to personalized level. And so while it's the same question, that is the shift I think that caused that huge jump in positive. Missing assignments, right? I asked, do they have fewer missing assignments than in years past in the fall? And I asked since first semester, that it was a low percentage in the fall. It is lower in the spring. So homework for sure. You can see the other two reds about the curriculum, which we talked about earlier, and then also absences and tardies. That missing assignments, phones, absences and tardies, that is a huge touch point with the staff for sure. You'll notice that there's another color up there. It is orange. It was kind of not red, but it kind of not yellow, and I didn't want to fudge it.
Stair steps.
So yeah, it's a stair thing, right? I'm the one who does the 0.25. Ask Miss Hardy. I just did interviews for her. She's like, it was either 4 or 3. I'm like, I know, it was a 3.75. You can see that while the percentage, for students, it went from 68.9% to 60.9%. But the no change in there, I felt like, oh my gosh, it seems like it's no change and positive because the disagree didn't really change, and it's the same amount of students. And so we kind of put that there. And so that the trend data, I would love to say that we made progress on every single goal. We did not. And so I think that when the committee talked about our procedures, it comes out both qualitatively and quantitatively. And so then I know that that is something that we have to address, and that's why it's going to go to committee this summer. And then I thought I would just, across the bottom, because I was spacing it out through goals, sometimes you can kind of get lost through all the different goals about what are the positives that came out of this, what are the negatives. So if it was 30% or higher from any of the groups choosing it, I put it up there. So if 1/3 or more chose it as a positive in the schedule, I placed it up there. You can see that the extended planning time is something that the staff really values. Also, finding balance in their school day, that has been productive. And then also that with the deeper learning part, that part of it makes that group about the extended periods, about discussions and workshops. So that was the activity that people felt strongly about. But again, you can see the differences between the two schools on some of the questions. Here are the top from students, right? Being able to better manage their homework load. Ironically, when you ask about the block days and better able to focus on their classes, it's a much lower percentage. And so I think it's because I chose the word focus, and they were thinking, can I focus through my individual classes rather than focus on my classes for the day? And so I may change that word in that question, but then I don't know what it'll do to my longitudinal data. For families, again, managing the homework load came out as their top benefit. Also being able to do retakes. The juniors and seniors in good standing. I did end up putting N/A. Some of our families have multiple students. So you might even see in the raw data, it may have been like 8.3% of the freshman families feel that way. Well, it's because that freshman family also has a senior. And so it kind of came out in both, but because they weren't juniors or seniors, I put N/A there since that wasn't a question for freshmen or sophomores. And then here's the top challenges for the staff. We talked about the phone one already, and then also absences. And then really it gets down to students being able to use that time, right? Sometimes students, when they choose, my category was prefers one schedule or the other. Students saying like, why can't we do the block day like we did 2 years ago? And I think sometimes the students don't fully remember that when they were in the block periods during COVID, they could be in school from their bed, that they could turn off their screen and go to the bathroom and come back, and all of that kind of stuff. And so that while we've done extended periods before, this is like a real extended period, probably for the first time for them because they're actually sitting in desks, and that we can see if they're participating or not or things like that. From students, again, that you can see that the exhausted part. We talked about the deeper enriching experiences before. The C-Day lunch being too late during the day. I'm glad the percentage went down because that just means that the students remember that I flipped that period so they don't have to worry about that anymore. And so homework, I think, increased amount of difficulty of homework. The families and the students actually don't have the same percentages across that. And you can see that here. So too much time throughout the day comes the top family challenge, and that is not a top student challenge. But I would say if you look at the phone response, that's also probably the top for the staff. So adults are feeling one way, and the students definitely another. And that is me. So
I gotta say, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That's so much work.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it.
I mean, I could really get into the weeds. I think partly when Hank said, like, let's just put up all of the raw data online so anyone can download it, I think that was partially so that I wouldn't go so into the weeds on my slides. But I do think it's important because, again, one, I loved teaching, and I still, in my heart, am a classroom teacher. And so I do think it's important to talk about all of the different things and how they work together. And so while I know it's a lot of information, I really appreciate you giving me the time. I hope I didn't go too fast or too slow for you. And I know, always following up with students is impossible because they're always amazing. And so if you do have any questions, I'm happy to take them now. I know that we've we've been doing them throughout. But then also, if you have additional questions later, I'm always happy to come back, especially after I talk with staff and students when I get my committees together, and also try to figure out the difference between the two campuses. I'm happy to come back and talk more.
In the phone thing, is it two different things? Being on your phone when you should be listening versus being on your phone like when you could be seeking help or
I think they feel equally as strong about both. Just that looking up when you've done your opening slide and you look out at the class and you see heads, that's rough. I mean, that's just a rough thing. Asking a student to put their phone away, I would say most students will do it on one, but then when they pull it out again, and then again, and then they put it on their desk and it flashes, like, it's a lot. And so I think if students knew how hurtful it feels when they go on their phones, I think our students may not go on them as much or would be less likely to. But you also don't want to you're hurting my feelings, but it's hard. It's hard. So I think it's not just they're on their phones, they're not coming to me. It's they're on their phones in class. They're taking their phone to the bathroom. Yes.
Do we have any classes that use phones for like surveys and such?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so sometimes it's gonna be, it's hard.
Yeah, it's a mix.
But would it be more like, okay, everybody take out your phone and do this, versus.
Yes. And I think many teachers,
stopping,
everyone has their own thing, but everyone, this is your reminder, please put your phone away. I do not want to see them. I think many teachers start with that phrase. Others will, everyone put your phones at this spot in the desk face down so I can see them. So that, you're not gosh, when I was teaching, there was still they would put it in their sweatshirt and they would text without even looking. And you're so you don't even see the phone. You're just, and I still don't know how they do it, but,
Well, every class, does every teacher have to make a call out on every class, or does a teacher just have a rule? And I'm in Mrs. Fit class, and her rule is.
Right now it's at the teacher's discretion currently, and that's why we're talking about, we've heard from our staff that they would prefer that there be at least a default baseline across the school, so that's what we're working through. And what Scott will talk a little bit about his work with the Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee, but that's what we're working on to bring the board this summer with student handbook and some language in there that would be at least a default expectation across the board, knowing that it is a classroom management, classroom resource decision, so teachers still need the ability where, we're gonna go outside and take pictures of this, so, I remember, trying to get enough digital cameras for a classroom was impossible. Now, every kid has at least one in their pocket, right? So it's a balancing of when is it appropriate to use it and when isn't it.
Yeah, it's just like listening to music when you're working independently. That if you ask 5 different English teachers, we're all going to say 5 different things. I didn't allow my students to listen to music because I don't think that you could really write effectively with music playing, but whatever. That's my thought. But then
Before my music teacher and I told my kids if they wanted to listen to music, go
that's
ahead.
fine. Yes, but my teaching partner for years, she just said, the minute you were working independently, you absolutely can listen to music as long as when I say, let's come back, everyone's ear pods are out, because that's also kind of part of it, you can have earbuds in and they're super hidden now. And so, fighting those tech battles are a challenge for sure. I think the world is fighting the tech challenges right now, right? So.
Well, pretty soon it'll be.
So I have just a couple of more broader comments. One, 77% of families chose not to participate in the survey. So when we look at, how we weight what we're looking at here, I think there needs to be some understanding that the family responses were not as strong as we would have liked them to be. It's not that the information there isn't useful, right? But it's not as detailed and as useful as it could have been otherwise. And so certainly if you are motivated to say something, you really love it or you really hate it, right? You might be motivated to participate, whereas if you're okay with things, maybe you don't bother taking the survey. So I think there's something there to consider. Appreciated very much the fact that we had 67% of our staff participate in the survey. And so I give heavy weight to that just because I know I'm getting some good data there, right? And we had 40% of students. So not as many students as we would have liked, but I don't know how many could we reasonably expect too, right? I mean, they're pretty busy people. So there's that. And wanted to also remind everybody that we didn't survey last year or the year before that or the year before that, right? So we could have very easily, asked a lot of questions about how do you like the 8-period day and what's good and what's bad about that, right? So this is an exercise in evaluating and making what we're doing right now better. And maybe we should have been doing this before, but we're doing this now, and I'm glad that we're doing it. But it does make things difficult because you don't have, you mentioned longitudinal data, right? And we don't have anything to compare this
Well, many
to.
of the things that we're measuring weren't even an option under the last schedule.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So,
we had
yeah.
COVID.
I'm hoping that the increase in staff participation and the increase in family participation from the fall, selfishly, I hope that because they see that I'm presenting out the data and that I'm working with people to help improve, things that they're bringing up, that more people are responding. So I hope that continues to go up.
Encouraging.
Was that was an increase?
It was an increase.
Increase from
for
families.
staff and families.
Yeah. About
Students.
310 families and about 70 staff members.
Students, a slight decrease, but we heard, from seniors that were like,
I'm out of here.
Yeah, I'm out.
Senioritis
Yeah.
still
It's
exists.
about 160 fewer seniors and about 153 fewer juniors.
And then, just lastly, as we heard in a recent meeting, we haven't seen a big change in the number of A's, B's, C's, that.
Well, the grade distribution has remained, for better or worse.
Right. So when we look at that, like ultimately, that GPA, that matters, right? And what we can say is that thus far we haven't, by making this change in the schedule, it hasn't negatively impacted those grades, which I think is a real triumph, as I said previously, because this was a pretty big change, and the students have been through a lot of change the last few years, and so this is, I still think, really promising. I'll stop there. So.
Also, I want to, you said for our students, it's been a lot of change. It's been a lot of change for our teachers.
Teachers too.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So the fact that.
Thank you for pointing
we
that
haven't
out.
seen a dip in student performance is huge kudos to our staff
Huge.
that have absorbed like 4 years of continual change and changes in society like we've been talking about tonight, and have still been able to help keep students at least there where we've been in the past. I would expect that we'll all get better as time goes on, moving past this. But our teachers have put in a ton of work throughout the pandemic, and now that whatever this is post-pandemic, if that's what it really is, but they deserve a lot of credit for all the work that they've
We've asked a lot and they've delivered.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Do we have access to any of the free responses from staff as board members? Would we have access to
We
any of that
don't,
information?
we don't publish those because when they're submitted, it is with the intention that a very small group of people are going to look at those, and there's sometimes very specific things about themselves or staff members that it is not collected with the intent that that will be shared.
Okay.
Wider than Ryan's circle that's analyzing it. That's why he brings you kind of the summary of those responses.
And the staff committee read those with me.
Okay.
So it's that very small group, but people are named by name, people talk about their own specific circumstances in it. It is definitely not intended, and when we put that survey out, if that was gonna be the case, we'd wanna say in advance, like, all of this information will be made public. That's never the intent. Because if you do that, then people will kind of may couch their responses
Sure.
knowing that that might be released to the public. We want that committee to have as raw of responses and honest of responses as possible, so we have to protect the confidentiality of that information.
In relation to the cell phone policy, from the responses that you got, was there any suggestions from staff as to how to go about addressing those issues from us?
No, other than like we need to do something, usually in all caps, and I'm not joking.
Yes.
And so I think that the teacher. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think Scott is gonna talk a little bit more
Yes.
about that when he comes
Yes.
up. So I will save that nugget for him.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, preview. All right, any other schedule questions?
I just want to say thank you, and, you know, we had access to the raw data earlier, the board did, but your presentation was incredibly helpful
Oh, good.
tonight.
Thanks.
And I really do appreciate all the hard work you put into it. It was really very helpful. And your insights from the
I
data.
am a data nerd, so I'm good.
It's a good thing to
Really?
be.
Thank you.
Surprising.
Got the right guy. All right, Scott, you're up. Give you your chair
That's
back.
all right. No,
You're just gonna
no,
stand
I'm
there?
just
All
gonna
right.
stand. That's all right. You guys can all take
He's
a
been
break,
sitting
too,
too
if you
long.
stand for a minute.
Yeah.
Well, we met Wednesday, April 19th, and we had about an hour and a half meeting, so I thought I would try to challenge Ryan tonight and take you minute by minute through that meeting.
Let's go.
Oh, thank you.
We'll
all be on our
some of my notes when we get to some of this.
I'm probably gonna step out, but you keep going. I promise I'll be back.
Right?
I'll be back.
But we were, so we met over at South. We went through our PAT coordinators, talking about our PAT program that supports students that, instead of an out-of-school suspension, to support them in an in-school intervention.
Oh, okay.
Excited about that and the feedback that we got about their presentation, their data, just the program itself was just outstanding from the parents. More through our Google form that they provided feedback on. We had a mixture, Karen was with us, but we had a mixture of staff and parents. Jenny and Mike were with us, so you can jump in at any time too. So that was wonderful. We spent some time looking at the cell phone proposed kind of changes. We did that in kind of a small tabletop exercise and then came together and kind of shared out. I'm just gonna read some of the notes that I took because I thought it was an amazing conversation, and I felt bad because we went 10 minutes longer on it. So we kind of shortchanged my area, which was okay because it was our special ed data, and that's totally fine. But I'm just gonna read through some of these and you guys can jump in. Some of it was talking, I'm gonna read just the list kind of quickly, but to look at the definition of like, how do you define reasonable time frame? Maybe looking at out of sight instead of not being seen or used. Many of the tables were in agreement that they appreciated that the district was looking at how to support the teachers. Definitely concerns like we've heard from Ryan, so some of this will be a little repetitive, but definitely wanted teachers to focus on instruction, so wanted to have us keep that in mind. But also, there was some comments made about, how parents do appreciate that they can communicate back and forth with their student during the day, wondered how that might affect that. Talked about whatever we change, make sure it's strong communication, both to the parents and students, and obviously to staff, but really they were kind of focused on parents and students, so they knew what are the expectations? We talked a lot about, you know, focusing on also, you know, if there's students, if the majority of the students are following expectations, to focus on the students that weren't, you know, following those expectations. Wanted to know what other schools are doing.
I think too, it was, not to interrupt, but it was important to not make work for the teachers. Like,
Yes.
enforcing this policy,
Taking time away.
you know, is gonna be a challenge. And it's difficult to gauge what they have to do right now in terms of, like you said, like sometimes they say, when you come in, put your phone here so I can see it, you know, and, you know, we don't want it to become like, okay, that's your first infraction, and now that's your first infraction, and then what happens to
Just
it?
gotta keep track of it.
So they get one in first period, and then they go to your class, and do they get another one? And, you know, I mean, like, are we just making, we don't want to make it worse, but we need to have.
At the same time, I mean, the intersection is the behavior in the classroom.
Right.
So it is, it's, you don't want it to take away from it, but like any other student behavior, there needs to be a consistent reinforcement of those expectations in the classroom for it to get better, right? So, but we also need, you know, and this is why it was important to meet with parents. We need parents reinforcing this too when we reach
Right.
out and say, like, this is an issue, and a teacher reaches out or a dean reaches out. We're gonna need some helpful reinforcement from parents at home saying, yeah, it's also my expectation that the teacher doesn't have to talk to you about this again.
Right, yeah, and we just, I mean, we don't, it's disruptive now, I'm sure, but we don't want to make it more disruptive.
It's just a challenge, right? Because that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there was a block of comments exactly like that. That was gonna, that's
Sorry.
perfect. No, that's great. You know, talking about obviously, you know, respecting the teacher, the time for instruction, logging the interventions, and how to manage all that, and just be, you know, respectful. And then, you know, talked about, you know, again, like other schools, but also what is our elementary schools doing. We talked a little bit liability of phones and, you know, all that. You know, about, you know, student rights about phones and things like that, and, you know, phones are expensive. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the most of it. The feedback that we got from the forum about cell phones really focused on just appreciating that, you know, hearing from the surveys, and just the cell phones are just on the radar right now, that the district is looking at supporting teachers through a collective systematic effort with that. So that was kind of, I think, a lot of it with the cell phones. And then we did move on to just sharing a little bit of data about special service, our students that have IEPs and their suspensions that they receive. And the really goal of that was me just highlighting, looking at the data and saying, by looking at this school year's data, we will focus on looking at that in more detail in the summer to try to make, you know, decisions. So it was more of a think aloud exercise of going in my head of how do I look at data, and I'm like Ryan, I love data, so I think it helps us and it's great. And then Gina presented about the consolidated district plan, and from there we just sent out our Google form and got some good feedback. We were small but mighty. You know, we're in person this year. We did have more attendance last year, being through Zoom, but we did like the fact that we were all together and could kind of just, you know, there was a lot of great feedback. So.
Yeah, I would do a lot more.
So, yeah.
You think next year it might be possible to allow both to happen?
Yeah.
That you could participate through Zoom instead of being there?
Almost have to do two separate ones, because
Yeah.
it's just so different to plan. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's hard to do both.
I think we
But
need to
it's something
encourage
think
getting
about, though. I
back
mean,
into
'cause it
the,
did- I always say that, you know, and I know Dr. Peter said this too, I mean, our parent-teacher advisory, whether it's big or small, over the years, the feedback that's come
Been
out of
really
that
good.
has really driven a lot of what we've,
Yeah.
we've added, social workers,
Policies.
the government. The PATH program, really started by talking with our parent-teacher advisory group and introducing the concept, and now it's happening, and now the board has supported, Patrick and Michelle to be full-time in that role. So we're excited about that. So, I mean, it doesn't matter what the size is, we still get great feedback, so.
Is it possible to have a virtual and an in-person session just
Yeah,
for
I
two?
mean, we could discuss how that might look next year, sure.
That's a good idea.
It just reminded me of Room and Zoom. That's what we used to call it when it was the hybrid Room and Zoom.
Yeah, it's definitely something to consider.
Sure.
Okay. Any questions?
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No comments?
No comments.
No reception of visitors? Okay.
You have my clicker. Either you gotta give it back or you gotta drive, one of the two.
So we have no reception, no visitors. So we now need a motion for the Board of Education to go into closed session for the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the district, including meetings held for the purpose of discussing whether a particular parcel should be acquired, student disciplinary cases, and the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the district or legal counsel for the district, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer of the district, or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity.
So moved.
Mike and Sherrill.
Thank you very much. Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller,
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich,
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler,
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza,
Aye.
and Nancy Kupka.
Aye. You're going into closed session. There will be no motion other than adjourning. I would just like to take one last opportunity to thank our student board members.
Thank you very much.
Next board meeting, you get another chance.
For some reason, I thought this was
Yeah.
yours.
No,
Oh,
they
I take it
gotta
back.
come back for
I
cake.
take it back.